Good morning and welcome to the third edition of UHY Cast. I hope you've listened to the previous series and enjoyed those episodes that we've done so far. This morning, I'm delighted to be joined by Julian Bambridge, CEO and shareholder of MPM Products. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning.
I hope you've had a safe journey up from Surrey this morning.
Yep, been doing it for 10 years now. I unfortunately could have moved a long time ago, but never managed to get the family up the motorway, so live in Wilmslow in the week, back down to Surrey at the weekends.
Fantastic. Well, the sun is shining today, so what's not to love about Manchester?
It's good.
So I guess before we get into the detail of the amazing journey that you've had with MPM, and I guess for those listeners who are based in the Northwest, I'm sure they will know about the success and the amazing achievements that you've succeeded with it and achieved with the team there. I think what I'd like to do just to start with is maybe just go back to your kind of younger years and just maybe you could share with us a little bit about your upbringing,
Sure.
your years of school and where it all started for you.
A fairly unmiraculous upbringing. I grew up on I think it was then one of the biggest council estates in Europe. It was built Peterborough just after the war. But again, unmiraculous. I say a very caring, loving family, extended family environment. I went to a comprehensive school. I did okay. But as I said, nothing incredibly spectacular about that, but a very sort of caring, warm, loving family environment. Pursued a lot of sporting interests during that period and then went to university at the end. Originally, funnily enough, to study physics and electronics, which only lasted 1 year when I figured out how hard the maths was, and then swapped to sports science, which was much better.
Right.
And so I ended up with a sports science degree in the end.
And has sport always been something you've had a passion for?
Always been a passion. Played rugby my whole life. A career in two halves, really. Played up in the Midlands up to level 3, which is pretty decent, but in the midfield, so as a centre, and then had kids, got some injuries, and then played the second half of my career in the front row, which is, I know, is a big change, but I saw when I went down south, found out that I couldn't keep up anymore, so it was a natural progression to the front row, which I played till about 38 years old, again back up to level 3, so decent level, but I had a hip replacement at 39, so that was it, done, finished. Before that, swimming was the big thing. Threw my hat in the ring on everything, put everything on the table to make it to the 88 Seoul Olympics, but wasn't good enough, so we called it a day after those trials in Coventry back in those days.
Wow.
I called it a day on that, and went, and because rugby was a hell of a lot easier in terms of the training in those days, and had some ancillary benefits around being allowed to drink and eat what you wanted, which swimming you can't.
No, there's some contrast there. You wouldn't necessarily put a rugby player and an athlete who is at the top of their game, kind of pushing for an Olympic place in the swimming team together.
No, I think it was I'd always played rugby along the side. I think my swimming coach was always cross about the amount of injuries I turned up to training with, scuffs, stitches, all that kind of stuff. So, and then I started playing rugby, like really committed after the swimming. So, for me, rugby was the enjoyable bit, swimming was the hard work bit. But they kind of went hand in hand because it makes you very fit for both.
And just reflecting back on those team sports and obviously the swimming side of things, which is a lot more individually focused, do you feel that that's given you some kind of firm groundings for your career and your business progression?
Huge. I'm a big advocate of team sport. There's cricket, football, rugby where you're thrown together with, particularly when you get into adult sport, and there's adults alongside, obviously, when you're coaching youngsters, but you could be playing in a first team that's got a KC now. It's not QC anymore, is it? So a KC right down to a bricklayer to whatever, policeman, and you've all got to exist in the same space. So I think you find a lot out about yourself and how you interact with other people through that. Swimming's a really interesting one, actually, because it's the only sport where you hold a conversation, for example, like a 5-minute conversation with one of your teammates that lasts for nearly an hour and a half. After each set, like you have 5 seconds, then 5 seconds. So it's another skill. You have to remember what you're saying and where you've got to in a conversation. So you do have chats, but it is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and I guess I've never been a fan of swimming, being honest with you, unless it's involving a holiday. But I suppose there's a lot of mental strength that goes into that swimming side of things, because you are in there on your own, focusing and trying to deliver that result.
Yeah, and it gave me a lot of. I think it prepares you for that individual pursuit a little bit, but all there's you can keep the team sports going alongside it. But swimming genuinely is one of the ones you can't even chat. When you're at it, you can't. There's not really a lot of camaraderie when you're on the blocks, ready to go. It's all about you.
Yeah.
And it's about mental preparation, but it's in how you look at it, and using that that feeling, that butterflies, that slight feeling of nausea, that making that into a positive. Say, no, that's showing that I'm ready now.
Yeah.
I need that. If I don't get that, I'm not prepared properly. So if I get all that, yes, I'm ready. That means I'm ready to go. If you turn it into a real positive, then it becomes your friend, not your enemy.
Absolutely. No, amazing, and hopefully, hopefully some inspired listeners can follow some of that in their own sports. I certainly know within our cricket club that I'm involved in, a lot of the younger players kind of do look up to people and try and take some of the benefits of that team sport.
Yeah, and I think it allows you. The great thing about team sports, nobody's allowed to be, you're not allowed to wear your narcissism on your sleeve, are you? So I think it really helps to sort of say, no, I think you need to rein that in a little bit there, fella.
Yeah.
And those lessons you learn early doors don't half help you in the business world, where you think, no, I need to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah. So I guess sounds like university was an interesting time.
Yeah, it was.
Flipping between the different degrees. So moving kind of into your working career then from university. Talk us through kind of what you were looking for. Obviously, a sports science degree. Were you looking to go into physiotherapy or sports? Or
no, I kind of knew that wasn't. Most of the guys on the course went into teaching in those days, and I knew that wasn't for me. Although my parents were desperate for me to go into that role, I wanted to get out there into the business world, and got into the sales side of things really quite quickly, and then eventually the business I was working for got bought by Procter & Gamble. I don't have the grades or the qualifications to have got into Procter & Gamble through a graduate route, so I was absorbed through an acquisition, which was fantastic. And for me personally, I'd spent 12 years at P&G. I was phenomenal learning ground. I learned so much, and a lot of people, it's not for them. I didn't fit in at P&G, but I learned all the way along and took jobs that each time doing something different, learning a new skill set in a different area, trying to push myself and use everything they've got. But there's no better MBA in the world than some of these big companies. They teach you what good looks like. Yeah. They teach you the commercial nature of business itself, and how to be self-reliant and how to be able to run a team broader than yourself. So, yeah, you learn a ton of stuff.
And how did you find that transition from being a relatively small business that was absorbed into this kind of global international giant? How did you find that transition, and what did you find the challenges from that?
For me, I was quite young, so I did. To be honest, I made my mind up to throw myself into it. Just say I'm gonna really suck up every opportunity this business has got for me, because it was like I was a child in a sweet shop, just standing there. Wow, from coming from doing everything yourself to these, they've got training courses, they've got development. I didn't know what a PDP was. I had no idea. I didn't know what an appraisal process was. And then suddenly they're throwing all this training and development at me, and would you like to go? And you'd speak to the people that've been in PG a while and go, I've got to go in this course. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's brilliant. Let's go. Let's do that one. Let's do this one. Let's do it. So, and you get to work. So you were on the Tesco team, or on the Costco team, or on the Carrefour team. I'm going to do this project in Europe. It was all just fascinating. So I think the downsides were, from an uneducated, naive perspective, I didn't realise that you had to not only grab all of those experiences, but you had to politically build your career as well.
Yeah, of course.
Which I failed to do, unfortunately for me. Although I did well, I didn't do all those proper building blocks behind that. I'm not very good at them. I don't think I am now. So, I came to a point where you run out of the nice things to do, and you end up sort of in a bit of a cul-de-sac of where they've pigeonholed you to,
sure,
and the jobs that therefore you're going to get within that organisation. And then very quickly it became, I don't think I want to be here for the rest of my life. I'm not going to wait for my carriage clock and my in those days half decent pension.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it still is actually. I mean, non-contributory index linked. That's not bad, is it? No, they don't exist anymore. So it was good pension. But can I stay here till I'm 60? Are the jobs that they're showing me what I want to do? So no, I was one of very unusual people that left P&G, resigned with then no job to go to.
Wow.
Because I knew it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I remember the HR, the exit, the legendary exit interviews in those days. The HR said, "Okay, where are you going?" I don't know. And I just sat there like, does not compute.
Yeah.
What do you want about? You're going somewhere bigger. You're going to Kraft, Unilever, Coke.
Yeah.
No, I'm just leaving.
Just cynically wondering where you're going. And what was the role you were in when you finally handed your notice in?
When I had my notice in, I was doing what we called in P&G, there's away from home market, but I was managing the Costco business across Europe and other bits and pieces like Spa. So it's quite a big team of people, the biggest team P&G had. And they were like running around selling into the wholesale train and that kind of stuff. But then when he sat down with him, he's like, right, next, can you look at country manager Chile? Can you look at this? It's like, not really for me. No, and again, I loved being at P&G. I love the organisation. It taught me an absolute ton of stuff. And I love my time there. And I wouldn't, I don't regret it. And I'd do it again.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for me.
Is it fair to say that a lot of that time at P&G was very, very much focused in that sales arena and driving the business?
Sales, commercial, marketing, that kind of stuff, all in that area, yeah.
And that's been something that you've always just had kind of within the blood?
Yeah, always. And it's the default, kind of the bit you enjoy the most.
Yeah.
I mean...
when it goes well.
Yeah, no, but even then, I spent sort of a couple of years running around the US trying to develop that business, and now we've got a really good CEO in the US who's sales focused, so I don't do that, which is great because it means that I can do other things. But it was a little bit of like, damn it, I'm not going to Kroger meetings anymore.
Yeah.
Bit of a shame, but it's right and proper that happens, and that team are very, very good now.
Sure. So obviously on the job boards, queuing up for your dole money, where did it go next from that kind of the big wide world out there?
Well, what you mean afterwards, or in between P&G and MPM? Well, in between P&G and MPM was interesting. I did a very short. I knew I wanted to get into the private equity world because that's where I'd seen people making a difference. I.e., I do this today and then this happens.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. There is also a larger financial reward if you get it right in that sector. So I went into it. I did a brilliant choice, Julian. I went into financial services business right in 2007.
Ouch.
Great choice. Well done. But again, I learned a lot because there was a very difficult period because a lot of the big customers that we had were like Lehman Brothers, HSBC, et cetera, and it didn't work for a number of reasons. But that's not the fault. They were sort of macroeconomic reasons. So that's not going to work. And I knew somebody who knew one of the founders of MPM. Wow. So there was 3 founders of MPM, John, Roger, and Roger, who, again, had a great idea, worked really hard and spent all of their money driving a business and getting a business up and running. They did a really good job of that. And I met John Kinsey through a friend of a friend, and John said, "Hey, look, Julian, you've just come out of P&G. Would you take a look at this? We think we've got a really good idea here. Can we commercialise it?" And I fell in love with it in the first couple of minutes. Although it was, again, I was having to drive up and down to Bollington then.
Yeah.
So sort of like every week. But it was either that or go back into the corporate world. I know I didn't want to do that. So threw myself into this at the time. So that was sort of end of 2008, and the business was turning over 2.6 million. So it's been 14 plus years now to the date. Wow. We're getting what we did we're going to do 200 million this year, turnover wise. And we've got offices, Phoenix, UK, small one in Bangkok, Shanghai, and Sydney. So yeah, it's been a fabulous journey. It's been real good fun. But again, without those 3 founders really putting the shift in, we wouldn't be here today. But we've taken it from there. and I think they put me CEO in 2010, something like that.
It was quite quick then.
Yeah. We had the first round of private equity with 3i, with ECI, the first one, which bought most of the founders out. And then we had the second bounce, which was 3i, which was coming up for 2.5 years ago. Wow.
Well, that's,
Already.
yeah.
And then the founders obviously had some equity left in the business, which is now gone.
And do you still, when you meet your potential investors, do you still make them try the pet food just to prove that it is edible?
I do. And on that point, as I always do, it's really interesting if you listen that this is a can of our dog food, but this is the real difference in it's not a marketing concept, but it always is. And we make everybody do this. You don't have to do it because you might be vegan, for example, or
I might choose to be today.
You might choose to be today. But there is a real difference. So when people open our cans and they expect it to be that brown, sludgy, smelly thing that they're used to at their childhood, what they don't realise is this when they open this can is it is a genuine human product. So no chemicals, no fillers, no preservatives. This product's got chicken, water. So this is hand-flecked chicken breast, a little bit of rice for the cooking process, and water. Now, can we see that? What's the best place to put it? We got that. There we go. So this is chicken breast. And because I know the process, and I'll show you everybody that at home, I'll eat that all day long because it's hand-flecked as well. It's not processed. Now, for humans, it's a little bit bland because it hasn't got any salt in it. But apart from that, it's chicken. You can if you want. Careful when you chip it up because there's water in it.
It does actually look a little bit like crab meat.
Yeah, it's pure chicken breast, I promise you.
Yeah, definitely some salt and pepper.
It needs some salt and pepper. There you go. So that is the difference. The difference is we took a human food concept and took it into the pet world, and we've been really well rewarded for that, both from a price and a sort of a commercial perspective.
Yeah, it's I guess you combining that business model with the booming kind of focus on pets and the way people treat these animals it was already
a premium and humanisation chain already, and it has been for 15 plus years at least. But this COVID it's gone crazy. So the amount of new entrants into the pet owning market, dog and cat, and then also rehoming and rescuing. I mean, there was a period during COVID where all the sanctuaries were empty. You couldn't adopt a dog if you tried. Then you turn up and they go, sorry, mate. Now, unfortunately, some of that's coming back. But yeah, so the pet ownership globally has gone up about 10%.
Has it really?
So, and now it was a bit of a panic. Everybody I know in business, those first few weeks, if you remember back to that March period, the first time around, everyone was a bit panicky. Are we going to get our route to market? For us, within a week or so, it's quite obvious that our route to market was going to stay open. So retailers, online, deliveries, all that kind of stuff. Our supply chain was going to remain open and raw materials were moving around, apart from a horrible spike in US inbound shipping costs, but same for everybody.
Yep.
It remained open, and you had this more focus on premium. So that's worked really well for us. We've had growth of 30% growth over the sort of 2021 and 22 period. And even now during this massive inflationary period where people are cutting back. Again, every time we do a study, the discretionary spend stays high on pet food and baby, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else drops, and it's become, I don't want to say recession-proof because it's such a bland comment, but sort of recession-proof. And a lot of investors now, if they're working in that consumer market, outside of human wellness and a few beauty products, pet is the sort of holy grail of investment, because it's continued to grow throughout that period.
And just going back to that first investment with ECI then, for those who perhaps haven't been through that process, or the fear of bringing in some external funding and sitting around a table with people that you don't necessarily know and them having a voice and an influence in where the business is going, how did you adjust from being a historically privately owned family run business with three founders? I guess, did that dynamic change, and what advice would you give anybody looking at that?
Yeah, it does, and you can't argue that it fundamentally does. Now, the benefit of our business is that you got myself, got a P&G background, so I was used to managing sort of those levels, and James, my COO, came from Deloitte background, so was again used to that management in that. So we were going back to some stuff that we already kind of knew. But it does change the business because, you know, you've gone from what you've got to try really hard to do is make sure that the pace of decision making, which makes you unique, doesn't slow down. So keeping the separate between the operational side of the business and that sort of longer development number oriented, where obviously your private equity house or your investor is going to want to know and really has a right to know. But you've got to be able to share those without slowing down the business. It does change because you have got to remember that you've got an interested party that wants to know what's going on, and you've got to be able to report. So for us, it was like, hey, look, sit down early doors. What is it you want to see? What do you want to get involved in? Right, here it is. Be really proactive about that. Here's as best we can. And we brought some extra beef in around our finance team to be able to supply that. So we added some headcount so that we can ongoing supply that information. And again, we had to do it again for 3i because, as you know, 3i are a listed company. So they've got another level of reporting every quarter that we have to make sure is pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think if you throw some resources at it, it's not as painful as you want. And then you've just got to be really proactive about what is it you want to get involved in and what you don't.
Yeah.
And be quite stubborn about that, because that's, I think, where lots of the arguments come, is what's day to day and operational and what's board level stuff. If you get that done early, I think it helps.
And just going through that kind of growth phase, obviously having studied the business and been amazed as to the amazing achievements that you've pulled together as a team. What was the kind of the game changer? Was it that step into the US market and picking up some of those large stores out there? What do you feel was the kind of the moment where you thought, wow, this is really going?
Yeah, there's a couple of moments really throughout. I think one was when we first landed our grocery business in the UK in the early days, because we sort of proved ourselves in that specialty arena. So the Pets at Homes of this world, and that was working, and we were back in that. When we first started getting into Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Asda, we didn't know the consumer would pick up they're really expensive products straight off the shelf. And we didn't have the money that Mars and Nestle have to throw at this. So once we got it on the shelf and it started to sell, we really have proved this here. And then we were James and myself were trying to commercialise the business as best we can, drive that gross margin as high as you can, because you need it to grow. I think the big breakthrough came for us was when we launched into Australia. We launched into Coles in, I think I'm going to say 2012, I think, if I'm right. And the big bonus there was, for a medium-sized fast-paced growing business, they paid within like 40 days, and it was in dollars. So you imagine, and for us, we were shipping in dollars as well. So it was an enormous bonus.
Yeah.
Not only were they paying us really quickly, they were giving us dollars. So we had a natural hedge. Suddenly we could start to pay bills a bit quicker. Suddenly we started to be able to invest in stock. And suddenly we were making really good gross margin. Bang. Then we can start investing. So that was a big change for the business when we started to move in Coles. And then again, when we made a big bet on the US when ECI came in 2015, and we landed Petco. And when it sold at the same rates or better than Pets at Homes rates in the US, we were like, wow, so this worked. This really does work. And that was another great day. And we've been having, I think when 3i came in at the end of ECI's, the big bet was, look, we've really worked hard to get a sort of a toehold in this US market. We would never forgive ourselves if we didn't see how good we could be in the US. And 3i backed us on that and said, yep, let's do that. And we recruited a global CMO. We recruited a US CEO, recruited a load of salespeople in the US, bought a load of stock, $20 million worth of stock in a period where, it was a challenge. All on this premise that we are going to go hell for leather in the US. And it's really, really worked. So we're going to do 100 million. We do revenues. Our revenues we do $100 million in the US this year. So it was a big bet, and 3i backed us, which is great. It's a tough board meeting when you say, look, I haven't got the orders, I haven't got the customers, but we've got to get the stock up. I think we need to put $20 million extra stock. Now, not what we've already got. And to be fair, you know, they got it. They got the premise, and you know, and it's growing pretty well.
Is it fair to say that over this kind of 15, 20-year period, there has been absolute focus on the core products, and you've not deviated? Because I guess a lot of businesses I see, they bring in private equity or they bring in an investor in, and they've got something that's got that traction. And I guess the US market point there really hits home, in so much as that market is so big. It would have been very easy just to dabble in it and get to $50 million sales and think, well, that's done, and then start going into alternative supplies for pets and what have you. And you see it happen all the time, and people get diverted away from that actual core purpose and core business. Do you think that's been a recipe for your success? Excuse the pun.
No, I know you're right. I mean, we've had the same core values, 3 core values for over a decade. Simplicity being one of them, as you can see in the product, transparency and responsibility. We live those every day, and we've kept that. And that product is the core of what we deliver. The naturalness of that product has been everything that we've delivered, and we've refused to compromise. That's the one thing throughout all of our investment periods, we've refused to compromise on the quality of that product. We've spent a long time moving production around, doing, we run a more for less program, obviously, like everybody else, but we've never compromised on the quality of the product, and it's rewarded us in terms of our ability to sell at a premium price. But yeah, we've stuck to those core principles. They've never changed. We're now a B Corp, registered B Corp. That's the last couple of years that's the big development over the last 2 years. Because we stuck true to those responsibility within our core values. So yeah, I think if you set that out early on in your life and stick to them, I think you can take your investment partners through that thesis. And it comes up, not least through inflationary periods where, what have we thought about shrinkflation? Have we thought about, and you've got to stick to your guns and say, no, that's not us. We'll do other stuff. We'll do a lot, but it's not us. Fortunately, we're in a premium market that's growing and still growing. But they come up, and rightly so, because you have to challenge yourself, right? But if you stick to your core principles and you keep reiterating that to your investors, hey, this is why you invested in us. This is why you thought it was a good concept. Let's not water that down right now. You can get through this, and they've, to be fair, both ECI and 3i never put us under a huge amount of pressure to attack the sort of the brand and the core. So we've kind of stuck to it and stuck to the principles of that.
Well, and it's worked, hasn't it?
So, yeah.
Fair play to you. And I suppose for those people listening who, again, just going back to the consideration around investment or private equity, what advice would you give them, and what was your biggest challenge, do you think, during those processes and that period of looking at options?
Yeah, do you know what? I think a lot of it, you don't know what you don't know. We don't do a lot of these, and anybody in this world, even the investors themselves, the partners, if you look at how many deals, they don't do loads. It's not like even the sort of veterans of the world, they've done 10, 11, 12. They haven't done like 40. They might have seen a load because they've been in the business, but then they themselves. So, it's a very nerve-wracking process because you don't know. So the first thing I say is get really good advice, independent management advice. We've used the same company, James and myself, over the last 2 deals, but it's just the right thing to do. And it's not, nobody's going to be upset by it, but it's independent advice for you as a management team. And when you're in that meeting at 3 a.m. on a Thursday, it's always 3 a.m. on a Thursday. Yeah. I don't know why.
Why can't they?
Some lawyers like it. I don't know what it is, but they love that. I don't know whether it's because we signed it at 4:30 a.m.
Premium charge overriders.
Yeah, well, probably right. I wanted to go to bed, but it was So when you're there at 3:30 in the morning, you're reading page 69 of that shareholder agreement again, and you're feeling a little bit, it's really good to have someone alongside you. So we had independent management advice and independent legal advice for the management team. And it's just brilliant because they just, it's that sort of hand on you, it's okay, that's fine, that's normal, or stuff like that, because stuff you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So I'm a big advocate of that, and I would always say, go and do that, make sure you do that. And then I think through the process, you just find that the investor that is as much like you as possible. And that sounds really trite, but it's not, because you've got to work with these guys for 3, 5, 6 years.
Yep.
So find and people work with people, right? So find them that've got the same kind of ethos about business, the same kind of feelings about what you will and won't do, and the same kind of and just people that you think, yeah, I can sit in front of this guy, girl, crew for the next 4 or 5 years, and it's going to be enjoyable. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be challenges, but make sure you pick the ones that have similar culture and ideals, because that sounds really rude, doesn't it? But money is money, right? It's pretty much the same, whoever gives it to you. So you've got to find that where the cultures fit, because that's going to be the thing that jars furthest down the line. They're the two biggest things for me. It's worth trying to find someone who's been in your area before.
Yeah.
But it's not essential. I think ECI hadn't made. They might correct me on this. I don't think they'd made a pet investment before, so it's not necessary. But it's helpful.
No, that's really useful, and I think that resonates with some of the things we see. And it's easier said than done, though, isn't it? And yes, it's time and effort ultimately, and you get the rewards if you get it right.
Well, just don't forget it's a two-way process. I know you're trying to sell your business, but also you're interviewing a prospective suitor, aren't you? So it is a two-way process, and don't forget that it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so sounds like exciting times. Global expansion's gone really well. 2.5 million up to 200+ million now revenue. What's next? Where's the new expansion?
Well, it sounds weird. We're just having a load of fun. It's always been about that for James and myself. And if we wouldn't be doing it. And it's a load of fun. We're still growing in the US. The US pet food market is enormous. I mean, just in our sector, wet cat is worth at retail somewhere like $4.6 billion. That's the bit that wet cat, for example, not wet dog or the whole of it. And $30 billion is the numbers that they say in terms of dog and cat food plus and growing. So yes, there will be a big focus on the US and carrying on growing in that market. And it's a lot of fun. It's good fun to break those barriers down. I don't think there's another European-based company that have got a toehold in the US. So it's good fun from that perspective. And I think we believe we've doubled the business in the last 3 or 4 years. We could do it again and organically. So there's no reason why we couldn't do that again. And that excites us. That's the thing that drives us forward. So could we have $500 million business? Yeah, and that would be fun. And I think the things that go along with that, growing the culture and the dynamism and the people you bring in, because we in rarefied air, really, we're getting a lot of people that are coming to us with purpose because we're a B Corp. They want to work for a B Corp, and that's great to see because we can provide people with a bit of purpose behind their development as well as a job.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of fun. So yeah, I think I don't want to speak for James, he's not here, but we want to keep going.
Yeah.
We'd love to take this business as far as we can.
Yeah, and I can feel it. You've got that energy. You speak to some people who are definitely on the kind of the wind down. They've been through a few transactions and it gets tiring, whereas I can definitely feel that energy with you and that drive and passion.
I've been with my wife for a long time, and I think the fact that I'm not at home is quite a big reason for some of that. So there's something in it. So suddenly turning up at home and saying, what do we do now? Probably wouldn't be good for that relationship. No, yeah, and look, we put a lot of effort into this, and we want to see that effort through.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to see how good could we be in the US? Challenge ourselves to be, and how big could we make that, and how important could that be to us?
And in fairness, some of the accolades that you've picked up and some of the awards and the recognition in the Times and things like that, it's hats off to you guys. You've done something pretty impressive, and I think a lot of people listening to this will really kind of hopefully enjoy listening to what you've said, but also keep a keen eye on what the future holds.
Well, there's hard work. There's a good chunk of good luck in that. There always is. And then there's the consistent good decision making. But, there is a bit of luck in all of this.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer you create your own luck.
Well, true, yeah.
So, no, that's excellent. Well, hopefully that's been enjoyable for you. It's certainly been extremely enjoyable and informative from my perspective. If only I can do 5% of what you've done, I'll take that.
Thank you very much.
As with all my guests, we've got 3 final questions just to close out. So the first one is, when you were a child, what did you aspire to be?
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? This one, because my family will tell you, because I used to talk about it all the time. I wanted to be that guy that jumped out of the helicopter with the flippers on. I know that I wanted to be that guy. Yeah, literally nothing else. Mum, Dad, do you want to fly the helicopter? No. Do you want to do? No. Do you want to be in that? No. I just wanted to be that guy because I thought, how cool would it be? I didn't even think about the rescue side of it. It's just to fly somewhere and jump out the helicopter with flippers on. I didn't think it through properly, clearly, but
swimming was always in there.
Yeah, and I thought I'd be good at it. Was the kind of thing, but I kind of when I went to university realised that it's quite dangerous.
Brilliant. I think it's climbing up the ladder afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, okay. If you could change one thing in your career, what would it be?
It's a really tough one because I'm not. I think maybe I'd have worked a little bit harder at my profile at P&G, but I'm not sure that would have been me. So it's a tough question, would I change anything in my career? I think I would have started, again, and you look at the US business, I think everything happened in an order. So we probably could have started some of that earlier. But when you're growing and the cash restraints of the business and the people restraints of the business, and I think it all went in the order it was supposed to go in. So not a lot. I know it sounds again weird, but probably not a lot. Even if I had to rerun it,
it's not got too bad, has it? Let's be honest.
I've been a few events where I've gone to bed a bit earlier than staying up, and but in reality, no, I don't think there's a huge amount of change. To be honest.
Okay, and my favourite and final one is you're hosting a dinner party.
Yeah,
you're at the table. There's 3 empty seats around the table. Who would you invite and why from any year?
Oh, yes. It's got to be from a career and what I've enjoyed on the sports side. Martin Johnson would have to be at the table for a lot of reasons. He's quite good fun as well. He's got a lot of stories. I've already had fortunate enough to be at dinners with him, not sitting at his table. So it'd have to be Martin Johnson on the sporting side. And then there's 2 sort of, in my era, there's 2 people I kind of grow up. And David Attenborough is one of them. And not because I agree with or disagree or with his points. It's just how much he's covered in his life. People forget he's been Director General of the BBC at one point in time and stuff like BBC Two, I think. So just what he could bring to the table. And then obviously just to throw in a real curveball of Stephen Fry on the edges to bring in that sort of counterpoint to what was going on. I think that would be it if that's
lively debate.
Yeah, I hope so.
I've got Martin Johnson to pull and put out if needs be.
And stick his thumb in if you need to.
Brilliant. Well, really appreciate your time today, Julian. It's been fascinating. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Safe journey back down south.
Thank you very much.
Best of luck with the next few years of growth, and hopefully we see that 500 million, should I say, revenue business growing and continue to succeed. I hope everybody at home has enjoyed the 3rd episode. A big thank you to Julian and the team at MPM. We'll be joined by John Stevenson, CEO of Pareto, in the 4th edition, which will be live on the website in the next month or so. So thanks very much for your time. Speak to you soon.